First of all, Richard Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, RJ. Interested in our conversation today.
Me too. Professor Wolff and I have decided we're going to talk about our responses to anti Semitism as a political weapon, are both political and observational reactions to it, because we both have some relevant personal history in that regard, as well as our normal state of observation. And for years now, it's been nothing less than maddening. Well, I'm sort of tipping our hand here, but so this will be both a personal and a contextual observation. But Richard Wolff, let's start with you. You identify, as they say, as Jewish. You have a Jewish background. Tell us about that a little bit so we know what we're talking about here.
Okay, my family is actually mixed. I should explain. I have Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish relatives in the family, pretty close to the family, as well as in the family. However, my parents identified as Jewish because both of them were caught up in the European Holocaust, the Nazi program to eliminate Jewish people affected them. A good number of their relatives were incarcerated and eventually killed by the Nazis in concentration camps and all of that. I experienced none of that. I was born here in the United States and have lived and worked here all my life. But I come from that. And so the whole issue of anti Semitism has always been in the environment. My parents were not religious. I'm not either. I do not attend a religious institution or anything like that. But here's what has been bothering me. Is there a prejudice against minorities here in the United States? And I will say, I was born in, as I've said on this program, in Youngstown, Ohio. I've lived in half a dozen different states. I went to school in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, in California. So I've been around the United States. And I would say, yes, there is in our population quite a bit of prejudice against various minorities, Black people, brown people, people with varying kinds of physical ailments, mental conditions, and also people of minority religions. Jewish is a minority religion, a small minority. I have had good friends who are Catholic who have told me about their situation, particularly in the American South, in areas where they felt a considerable prejudice against them because they were Catholic, and so on. So I'm aware of it. I think most Americans are more or less aware of it. So then what sense do I make that suddenly our government, which is not exactly battling this problem on a full-time basis, according to me anyway, in my lifetime, I've never really seen it. Yeah, most politicians give lip service that you shouldn't do it, but they don't do all that much. Even when they change the laws in good ways, they leave personal feelings to the people who have them, and that allows the prejudice to go from generate. And so has anti-Semitism. But suddenly we have a government, particularly in the last few weeks, but even under Biden for a while, a sudden interest in anti Semitism and the urgent need to combat it. Well, I think I smell a rat here. There's something wrong. Has there been a sudden explosion of prejudice against Jews? Not that I'm aware of. I live in New York City. Lots of Jewish people here who might occasion such expressions. They are a minority, but nonetheless, there are a lot of them. I don't hear it. I don't hear it spoken of. I don't feel it. I don't experience it. So what is it? Oh, then it dawns on me. Wait a minute. There is a widespread feeling that what the Israelis are
Mm.
doing in Gaza is horrible. And this includes people who were horrified by what Hamas did back in that October that set this off. But there are a lot of people, including a lot of Jewish people, who find the reaction of the Israelis unacceptable, against their principles, against what they believe to be Jewish principles, by the way. And what I then see is anti Semitism being used as the excuse and nothing more to come down on people, not because they're hostile to Jews, because they aren't, but because they are critical of Israel in Gaza, which is true, they are. And what that does is cheapen the opposition to anti Semitism. Because when you abuse something like that, it becomes less of an important issue in the society. And we've seen that with racism. If you see black or brown people abusing racism to cover over their own misbehavior, it cheapens the otherwise noble effort to get rid of racism in our culture. And we expect good people to call it out. And that's what I'm trying to do here with anti Semitism.
Let me let me respond by offering a similar sort of biographical and observational response. Okay, I was born in the early 1950s to what was then considered a mixed couple, because my mother was of a Christian background. Her mother was French and Catholic, her father Protestant. My father was Jewish. His parents were immigrants from the Russian Empire, now that part now known as Ukraine. And my mother was all her life a hardcore anti-fascist, leftist, anti-racist feminist. One of her brothers died fighting fascism, so that added to her feelings about it. My father grew up in New York City, Jewish, lower income, lower working class. His father was a tailor. My mother, when she married, it's clear from her descriptions of when she first saw my father at UC Berkeley, there was something exotic or other about him. There's no question that in the 1940s, Jew and 1930s, might have been late 1930s, Jews were to white Protestants the other. So, the way she describes him is he worked at the shipyard. His glasses were all pitted from the arc welding, and he was swarthy and dark and exciting. And she was an innocent blonde California girl, and nature took its course with those two for a while. So she converted to Judaism, and she took it very seriously. My father, as a lifelong Jew, a lot of people born Jewish, kind of like your family, very strongly consider themselves Jewish, but the religion, they can take it or leave it. That's more or less how my father was. But we belonged to a temple. My brothers and I were raised as Jews for what in retrospect seems some odd reasons. My mother is very much an atheist, but she said you should have a tradition to rebel against, which is odd, but we certainly did rebel. And she also said, I think, interesting actually, in the 1950s, she said, I think fascism will come to the United States someday, and I want you to know which side you're on, which is like, well, strange, because hopefully it would raise us so that in whatever form it took, we would know which side we're on. but she assumed it would come in the form of the persecution of Jews. Now, when I grew up, a different time, no question, anti-Semitism was a small part of my life. I mean, I remember we moved because my dad told a Jew would never get a promotion at the place where he worked. So he moved someplace else, just outside New York City, where he grew up, where being Jewish was not as unusual. Okay, so that was one effect. I had to fight Tommy McCarthy in fourth grade because he called me a dirty Jew, but neither of us had our heart in it. Beyond that, it really was never that much of a factor. I remember when John Kennedy died, and I was thinking I wanted to grow up to be president. I had the thought, yeah, but a Jewish kid will never be president. That's so I'd internalize some sort of outsiderdom, sure, but it was not, by the time I was a teenager, a college student, an adult, it was not a meaningful part of my life. Now, the other way that I observed the play of Judaism, and because I'm not religiously Jewish, I've also, when I think about my heritage, I think about the other side too. But the other way it affected my life was I worked for Bernie Sanders in the 2015, 2016 campaign, where they weaponized feminism to defend Hillary Clinton from this rapidly accelerating challenge from Bernie Sanders. And I remember, and they constantly referred to Bernie Sanders as an old white man. And a little like thing went up. Wait a minute. Bernie was born in the 1940s when being Jewish was not exactly white. And it wasn't. And I remember searching the internet. I actually found the best definition on the Black Communist League website. It said Jews are provisionally, prophetic in a way, Jews are provisionally white based on the needs of the ruling class. So, but it occurred to me that just as you could accuse some of the criticism of Hillary Clinton, rightly or wrongly, as being based on her gender, you could ascribe some of the criticisms of Bernie as based on his ethnicity. They made fun of his accent. He waved his hands too much. To me, he was the classic, outer borough Jew of the mid 20th century. But to them, that was something to mock. So I thought about snapping back, and I actually did. I said to myself, I wonder in 2 minutes, how much anti-Semitism can I find against Bernie in this primary? I found a lot in 2 minutes. Use of the K word for Jews, other expressions of hate from Hillary supporters. But I didn't want to do what they did, which was tar an entire group of people based on the hate speech of a few. So imagine my astonishment, Richard Wolff, when after the slaughter begins in Gaza, all of a sudden there is no more important issue to the Democratic Party and the Biden administration than anti-Semitism. You didn't give a damn when a Jewish guy was running for president. All of a sudden it's your biggest defining issue. And there were all these reports from the Anti-Defamation League, which, as I recall, when I was a kid, used to be a good organization, saying that anti-Semitism had gone way upward. Sure, it does. If you assume that any criticism of the Israeli government, even by devout Jews, is anti-Semitic, which it's not, yeah, you can say it's gone up. And I'll close with this. I just recently wrote about this whole issue and about the fact that Israel is now issued a proclamation that diaspora Jews. Now, remember, the reason we were told that Israel was created, I don't think it is the reason it was created, but the reason we were told it was created was so that Jews everywhere in the world had a place they knew they could go to for safety. Well, it's been announced that diaspora Jews who criticize the occupation will be blocked from entering Israel. Now, and my thought on that, which I wrote about, I thought of Rabbi Alyssa Wise, who has said that her Jewish faith is compels her to criticize the occupation and the leaders of Jewish Voice for Peace who were banned and others. And it occurred to me there's only one state in the world where Jews are banished and banned based on their interpretation of their Judaism, and that's Israel. Those Jews can go to Egypt, they can go to Jordan, they can go to Saudi Arabia, they can go anywhere in the world with their beliefs, presumably, but not Israel. And that, to me, is the ultimate statement of the politicization of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and for me, it is very tragic to watch because it is so transparent that you have to wonder what possesses people to think that that isn't something everybody sees through. I mean, the same government that is dismantling DEI, which was a lame effort to do something about the obvious institutional discrimination against black, brown, and female people. That's why it's called DEI. And it really meant very little. Corporations easily signed on and passed the resolution, all things that are mostly performative and very little in real effect. But the government is dismantling those while it is a champion of fighting anti Semitism. This is bizarre. Jews are a much smaller part of the population. Black and brown people suffer much more than Jews in almost every dimension I can think of. If you wanted to do something about inappropriate discrimination of minorities, then for God's sake, and if it isn't minorities and it ought to include women, you know, the Me Too movement is hardly exhausted. There's lots of examples of where it still needs to be brought. The government could be doing the things it claims to be doing, but instead it does it only on around anti-Semitism, and just coincidentally, while so many find what Israel does in Gaza abhorrent. Look at the votes in the UN. It's unmistakable what the views of the world are. And yes, Mr. Netanyahu thumbs his nose at all of this. I get that. Israel itself is divided. In their own country, they allow levels of disagreement which seem to be a taboo in the United States, which is thousands of miles away. The whole thing is very bizarre and makes a mockery of the whole claim to be concerned. And then I can't I can't not comment on the effort. I am a graduate of Harvard University, so I got an email, as we all did,
Mm.
from Alan Garber, the president of Yale, a week or so ago, in which he explains his response to the Trump administration demanding effectively control over many aspects of the programs at Harvard, the curriculum, the faculty. Extraordinary intervention in the life of a university by a government, something the Republican Party, for most of its history, would have rejected in principle and is now doing with gusto. But even he felt the need in that letter to devote, I don't know, a good
Mm.
quarter to a third of it to explain all the steps that he and his colleagues at Harvard have taken to expunge or to remove or to lessen anti Semitism. You know, this is all play acting. I don't take what he said in that letter very seriously. I don't think they did all that much. But to be honest, having been a student there and having followed events there, it's not a big problem there. Does it exist? Yeah. but is it a problem? Does it need, given our other problems, the attention it's getting? Of course not. This is a fig leaf to allow a dictatorial government to intrude where it would otherwise be harder for it to do so. And it's an excuse we should call out for what it is.
And it brings the Harvard issue brings up another aspect of this, which is what we could call the broader area of identity politics and its weaponization in recent years. First, when Bernie Sanders ran for president, feminism, especially, but also race, was weaponized against class and against politics of economic justice in a way that was astonishingly ahistorical, right? As you know better than most of us, the socialist and communist movements of the 19th and 20th century, as well as union movements and other economic populist efforts, were far more, were in fact the vanguards of racial integration, promotion of women, and challenging the oppression of women, on and on and on. So the idea that was floated against Bernie, that to care about income inequality was somehow anti-Black. Hillary Clinton famously said, what did she say? She said, breaking up the big banks won't do anything about racism, which is incredibly wrong. Of course it would, because the big banks are guilty of redlining and all sorts of racist practices. But so first, identity politics, more broadly speaking, was deployed against class and economic justice. Now it's being deployed against free speech, which is a net that's going to ensnare everybody, and the class divide particularly, as well as the speech divide. Your alma mater is the perfect example of what's wrong with this entire system. First of all, Harvard is not the champion of the people. People are making it out to be. I didn't go there, but I know that. And $53 billion endowment, tax-free, means that, well, if we assume those people were taxed appropriately, which they probably weren't, that's what, $20 billion the American people, in effect, have given in tax expenditure to Harvard. A lot of that from the growth of the endowment fund, but a lot of that from billionaires. So some billionaire gives $100 million to Harvard. The people have to kick in 35, 40 million of that. In return for that, that billionaire gets control over our speech and over the academic thinking that directs our government, whether it's in the Kennedy School of Government, your own department, your old Department of Economics, or whatever. So this, I agree, they need to resist. What Trump's doing is terrible, but this is your tribune of the people, Harvard, this billionaire tax dodge, and you get where I'm going, right?
Yes, I do. And let me tell you, I know the story even better of Yale, because being a poster boy for elite education, after I finished at Harvard, I went to Yale. It's like a joke. But in Yale, I learned, as a resident of the city of New Haven, the following reality about these kinds, and what I'm about to say about Yale applies exactly the same to Harvard. The city of New Haven is the seventh poorest city in the United States, but it charges it taxes to its residents, half of whom are Black and brown, Hispanic and African American. So it taxes poor people in order to deliver free services: the police, the fire, the public education for the children of Yale faculty and Yale students. All of those public services are delivered to Yale, which doesn't pay for them because the rest of the community's taxes are correspondingly higher and they pay for them. In other words, New Haven and Yale and Harvard are it's something you and I ought to talk about, RJ. They really are Robin Hood in reverse. They steal from the poor to make the rich even richer than they already are. It's an extraordinary upside down tax system that we live with. Anyway, this is an important topic. I'm glad that you were okay about talking about it. Now that I think about it, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we
Now,
did.
unless you have to go, we should wrap it up with a conclusion of some kind. The conclusion to me is, I think there's been a campaign of intimidation over a number of years, at least since 2015, last decade, not to call out the misuse of this kind of thing, because then you get called all kinds of unkind names.
Right.
And I think in the past year or two, with the horror going on in Gaza and getting attacked every time I speak up on it, my own ethnic background, no defense. I think the lesson for me is don't be afraid. Just say what you got to say, because otherwise they'll continue to use this to stifle speech about everything from war to economic equality.
No better conclusion. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
We depend on your support here at the 0 Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.